Hiya, Vinyl Monkey here again. Welcome anybody who chooses to join me, you're very welcome. And this week is a brief tour through this vinyl collection, picking out a few from the letter D. Before I go on to that, just correction from last week. I did mention, I think that inadvertently said that Be My Lover was one of the classic early Alice Cooper albums, but when I was talking about the album Killer, but of course Be My Lover is actually a track off the album Killer, and I should have said Love It to Death. So those classic four early Alice Cooper albums, Love It to Death, Killer, School's Out and $1 Billion Babies. That was the only correction I spotted, but probably others. If anybody else spots any, I'd be grateful if you can point them out. So this week, as I said, the letter D, about which I've got to tell you I am really excited. For anyone who's watched any of the previous videos, you probably don't think I'm particularly prone to excitement, but yeah, D brings that on, and it's not because Bob Dylan comes under D, but we'll come on to it later. But I'm going to start with an album from 1964. It's a jazz album. This is Out to Lunch by Eric Dolphy. Eric Dolphy's plays sax, flute, clarinet, and this is one of the few albums where he's actually acted as the band leader, although he did say to his band at this session allegedly that everyone in this band is a leader. And the result is what I suppose some people would call avant-garde jazz or free jazz, or someone who wanted to be cruel might say it's 5 musicians all playing 5 different songs simultaneously, or as the American comedian Rich Hall once said about modern jazz, it's like the sound of a blues band falling down a long flight of stairs. And you know, if you wanted to be cruel and critical, you'd say this album's like a 21-minute fall down that flight of stairs, but that's entirely not either fair or correct, because there is, although this is complex and it can be challenging in parts, there is real beauty to be found in this album. I think generally there's a cinematic feel to it. It feels like you're watching some sort of European psychological thriller movie type things in some of the tracks. And I find particular beauty in the bass playing of Richard Davis, who also played on one of my favourite albums of all time, Van Morrison's Astral Weeks. And also the vibes, Bobby Hutcherson on vibes, absolutely gorgeous. And I think when you get into the zone and you maybe really listening to this, you appreciate the beauty, perhaps all the more because of the complexity and difficulty of the album. But this is an absolute stunning album. Sadly, Eric Dolphy died a couple of months after this was produced in 1964. He'd gone to Europe like many jazz musicians, particularly black American jazz musicians, did. He felt that American audiences weren't receptive to people trying new things, and the Europeans were much more so. But sadly he collapsed on stage in Berlin and was taken to hospital, and the story goes, whether it's true or not I don't know, but the story goes that at the hospital there were assumptions made, black jazz musician, that it must have been a drugs overdose, and he was treated accordingly. Sadly, Dolphy apparently was a teetotaler, never touched drugs, drink, cigarettes, but he was unknowingly diabetic, and he died in a diabetic coma that night. But he's left this absolutely brilliant album behind. Eric Dolphy, Out to Lunch, 1964. My second album is from 1971, The Doors, LA Woman. The Doors' 6th album, and like Eric Dolphy, sadly, the Doors lead singer Jim Morrison, this was his last album. He died. This was a drugs overdose in his Paris apartment just a few months after this album was produced. But I'm not a huge Doors fan. Although I've got their first 6 albums, and I do think this is one of the strongest. It's a bluesy type of album, some great songs on it. It is a strong album, but I bought this not really because I wanted to buy another version of a Doors album per se. I bought it because it's pressed and made by Analog Productions, who are one of a small number of companies who produce what they call audiophile editions. So at about 3 or 4 times the price of a standard album, you can buy this that's been remastered from the original analog tapes using analog equipment and seeking to really present the sound of the album in the best possible way. Is it worth it? Am I just an audiophile snob? I don't know, maybe, but it's worth it to me. The clarity, the separation of the instruments, the fact that you feel the presence of those instruments in the room, you feel that they're there with you. Particularly Manzarek's keyboards in this album is stunning, and for me makes it absolutely worth it. So that's the Doors, LA Woman, originally produced in 1971, though this edition produced remastered Analog Productions in 2012. Third album is now this is the Mighty Diamonds, and I suppose I could have had these under M, but I put it under D because on some albums they were known as the Diamonds, and on some the Mighty Diamonds. But these are a 3-piece harmony vocal band from Kingston, Jamaica. This is their first album after they'd signed for Virgin Records in 1976. And it's an absolutely beautiful reggae album. A lot of the songs are actually around Rastafarianism, and particularly around Marcus Garvey, the black nationalist Jamaican sort of hero, politician who promoted repatriation to Africa and Pan-Africanism, and was an inspiration to many Afro-Caribbeans, black Afro-Caribbeans, and although that makes, you might think, oh, that sounds a bit heavy, sort of political sort of stuff. Although that's the case in the content of some of the songs, they're delivered with an absolute beauty that certainly matches anything that Bob Marley was putting out at the time. Although I think this band, like others, were eclipsed by Marley in terms of publicity and the profile that they got. But this is a great album from 1976. It's called Right Time by the Mighty Diamonds. And then I said I was excited, and I want to talk about these 2 bands that particularly excite me together. The reason I'm excited, I think when I said I'd been really taken with punk in 1976, 77, 78, and for me it was really all about the live experience, and these were the 2 bands I perhaps seen more than any others at those times. The first I want to talk about is a band from my hometown Hartlepool called Disguise, and these were a 3-piece pop punk band who wrote and performed brilliant, catchy, often witty 3-minute punk pop songs, epitomised by the title track here, Hey Baby, on their one track that's been committed to vinyl. They got a record deal with Chiswick Records, and it sadly only ever resulted in this one single with Hey Baby on the A side and Juvenile Delinquent on the B side. But Happily, the singer and bassist from Disguise, Jimmy McKenna, has archived a lot of their material and some other bands on his great little website called Vainglorious UK, which I've seen some people on YouTube go like this. They say, I'll put a link to it down below. Well, I haven't the foggiest idea how to do a link like that, but I am going to talk to my son about it, about how to do that. And so later on, hopefully that link might appear, but that's Vainglorious UK, which features the Disguise and other bands. At the same time, this band, Dead Fingers Talk from Hull, were playing lots of the same venues, workmen's clubs, nightclubs, pubs around the northeast. These hailed from Hull. The name of their band is taken from a William Burroughs novel, and this is their 1978 album Storm the Reality Studios. These were quite different to the Disguise. They were 4-piece. They were more arty. They were more challenging. Their lyrics. Their singer Bobo Phoenix was openly gay. I didn't know anybody. I'd never met anybody who was openly gay at that time, and he would really challenge homophobic attitudes headlong on, front on, directly with the audiences, and create occasionally quite a hostile atmosphere. Their sound is somewhere between New York Dolls, Iggy Stooges, Bowie, maybe even a bit of Stranglers in there with the bass up front. But this is a great album, still stands up today. It's a real shame it's the only one they ever produced. I'm not sure what their individual members went on to do after this. But it just reminds me of those nights, particularly one night at the Rock Garden in Middlesbrough, where after a gig, me and my mate were talking to Bobo Phoenix, the singer, sat on the stage, and these heavy sort of guys came over. I can't remember whether they were rockers or Teds or what, but being a punk in Wave 1 you weren't very popular really, and they came across to berate the group and the singer, and my mate tried to intervene to verbally defend them, upon which we were set upon and beaten up quite severely, then thrown out by the bouncers and beaten up again outside, and ended up with I think one eye was closed for a few days, and were bruised and cut and clothes ripped, and to find our lift had gone, and we were 12 miles from home, and in that state at midnight we had to walk home after a Dead Fingers Talk gig. So if you were one of the guys who beat me up that night, put a comment down below. It'd be great to get together and have a pint and talk about old times. But brilliant band, Dead Fingers Talk, Storm the Reality Studios. And then lastly, just want to talk about Doll by Doll. This is Gypsy Blood. I think it was their middle LP of 3. And Doll by Doll were led by this guy, Jackie Leven, singer and guitarist and singer extraordinaire really. He came from gypsy background himself. His voice was absolutely incredible, go falsetto through to baritone. And he was backed by this band Doll by Doll, which sort of had a big sound, an orchestral, proggy even type of sound, that was pretty much out of sync, I think, with a lot of what was going on at the time in new wave and post-punk, and for that reason they went under the radar really, and certainly I missed them first time round, but some great tracks on this. And Jackie Leven went on to produce some great stuff after Doll by Doll as a solo artist that is definitely worth seeking out and listening to. But that's Doll by Doll 1979, Gypsy Blood. Okay, so that was a quick tour through the letter D. I can come down from my excitement talking about the Disguise and Dead Fingers Talk now, and hopefully you might join me next week when we look at some albums from the letter E from this collection behind me. So cheers, bye.